get on my husband's grave.
I see a killer because she tried to kill me.
2 weddings, 2 funerals, and attempted murder. Raynella then told Steve that she would take him back to the house and help him with his ankle and talk things over. Steve told Raynella to leave the gun there, and he would. Raynella set the gun on the fence post and started walking back to the car. Steve was walking behind her, and when he approached the gun, he grabbed it and ran to the neighbor's house. Unfortunately, that neighbor wasn't home, so Steve found a culvert to hide in while Raynella drove around looking for him. When she couldn't find him, she drove to Kay's house. Whatever Raynella told Kay, she believed her. Kay called her children's daycare center and told them not to let Steve pick up the kids because he was acting crazy. Steve found a mobile home where an old couple answered the door. From there, he used his phone and called a friend to pick him up. That friend called the sheriff's office to tell them what had happened, and they sent out deputies to Raynella's farm to investigate. Unbeknownst to Steve, Raynella had already called the sheriff's office and lied and said that Steve had stolen her gun. When the deputies arrived at the farm, Raynella had a totally different story than Steve. In the end, it was clear to the deputies that Raynella was lying, and what Steve claimed happened was the truth. Raynella was charged with attempted murder and surrendered herself to police. That night, she was released on a $10,000 bail. Steve was terrified that she'd come after him, so he slept in the chair with a gun he had bought for protection. When Raynella appeared in court, her attorney filed for dismissal of charges, and a terrified Steve testified about what had happened. David believed Raynella when she told him that the gun accidentally went off, and that if she wanted him dead, that she wouldn't have missed. On January 1996, Raynella was indicted by a grand jury. 2 weeks before her trial, a plea agreement was reached. Raynella agreed to plead guilty to assault if the attempted murder charge was dropped. She got 6 years on probation and 100 hours of community service. If she kept out of trouble at the end of her sentence, her criminal record would be expunged. On August 12th, David and Raynella tore up their prenuptial and signed 2 new wills with their attorney, Charles Child. Child gave the parties the originals of the wills and retained silent duplicate copies at his office. In David's will, he disinherited Cindy and his grandkids, and Raynella was named the executor. Upon David's mother's death, Raynella would also inherit the family home and property. According to Child, David wasn't happy with his new will and didn't fully understand it. He wanted to meet without Raynella. Raynella claimed that David put his copy of his will in his sock, but his friend Gordon claimed that David had told him that he had put it in the cabinet in the garage. On January 30th of 2000, David was hospitalized for delirium and hallucinations. According to his doctor, Ronald Bryan, he was lethargic, sleepy but arousable, and fundamentally coherent, but with loss of memory. An EEG was conducted and produced an abnormal reading, and the MRI showed that David had suffered a mini-stroke. He also had a high cholesterol and herpes simplex encephalitis. Herpes simplex encephalitis is an inflammation of the brain usually caused due to infection that causes headaches or fevers. When David's family showed up to the hospital, Raynella was angry and told David's daughter, Cindy, that she would call her if there was anything she needed her to know. She then sent Cindy away. March 1st, Raynella went and prepaid for cremation options for her and David. At the age of 54, David retired from being a barber and passed his chair along to his daughter, Cindy. Cindy said that David didn't seem confused and that she was told he was retiring because he had an enlarged prostate and had to use a catheter. David would often visit the barber shop. He also continued to work out and tan. He would hang out with his friends, and they didn't notice any mental instability. On March 8th, 2001, David was hospitalized again after he experienced an episode of confusion and short-term memory difficulties, such as forgetting to answer the phone or to take a bath, emotional ups and downs, short temper, and falling asleep frequently through the day. David also told his doctor that he had thought that Raynella was trying to kill him by smothering him. His doctor just brushed it off because he thought David was just being paranoid. On March 1st, 2002, Dr. Bryan conducted a mini mental status exam which measured David's orientation, memory, and attention. At one point during the test, David began to cry because he was unable to spell a word backwards. David scored 22 out of a possible 30 on the test, and that his score indicated mild dementia. However, considering the possibility that the mini-stroke that David had suffered might be causing small seizures, he was prescribed epilepsy medication. At a follow-up exam on March 28, 2002, Dr. Bryan noted that David's symptoms had improved, in that he was no longer sleeping during the day, his memory was better, his mood was better, and he was interested in more activities, and recently had bought a fishing license. At a visit on July 3, 2002, Dr. Bryan re-administered the mini mental status exam. David's score had improved, and he would have had a perfect score but for the fact that he could not spell a word backwards. Dr. Bryan prescribed medication to improve David's memory. On September 30, 2002, Raynella's record was expunged and she was off probation. On October 17, Dr. Bryan noted David had mood swings. Dr. Bryan asked if David would come back at the end of the month. When David came back, he had improved again. David's final visit to Dr. Bryan was on January 16, 2003. He was crying and seemed to be frustrated because he was having memory problems. However, his condition did not appear to be deteriorating. Later that month, when Raynella went into the hospital to have a hysterectomy, she had David drop her off and told him she didn't want him to visit her. The next day when he picked her up, he learned that Raynella had a double mastectomy as well, because she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. In February 2003, David's mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Raynella lied, though, and told David's family that that was false. March 6, 2003, David had dropped by the home of his former in-laws. He mentioned his plans to go to a street rod's car show later that month. He also mentioned about a trip he was going to take with Gordon in May. On March 8, 2003, David went to visit his mom, who had taken a turn for the worst. Raynella had dropped him off and refused to go inside with him because of a liver disease she said she had. She said that the disease compromised her immune system and she could not go into the hospital because it was too risky. In the evening, David's daughter, Cindy, came by and noticed that his speech was slightly slurred. David said he wasn't feeling well. While Cindy was there, Raynella called the house. Cindy asked her stepmother what was wrong with her dad. Raynella claimed that it was a side effect from David's high blood pressure medication. Later that evening, David was feeling better, and he went with Cindy to Arby's for dinner. The two had a great time talking and laughing. Cindy said that her dad seemed in a great mood. The next day, Cindy went to visit her dad again and found him crying in his car. When asked what was wrong, David told Cindy that everything would be okay. On March 10, 2003, Cindy spoke with her dad on the phone. They got together 2 days later and made plans to haul a load of mulch the following day. Cindy and David's friend said that he seemed to be okay mentally and that he was in a really good mood. On March 13, 2003, a teary-eyed Raynella went to Park West Hospital and approached registered nurse Barbara Sadler. It was around 9 a.m. and Raynella told Sadler that she was upset because she did not want David's mom to be sent to a nursing home. Since there was no social worker on the floor at that time, Sadler told Raynella she would take care of David's mom. Raynella also told her that David was homesick with high blood pressure that morning. Just before 10 a.m., Raynella called David's daughter Cindy at work. She had never called Cindy at work before. Raynella had asked Cindy if David had stopped by to talk to her. Cindy told Raynella that she had not spoken to her father that morning. Raynella said that David didn't eat his oatmeal and she didn't want him to go work out on an empty stomach, which she assumed he had. Raynella then told Cindy she was at the hospital visiting David's mother and brought her some flowers. Raynella then put David's mother on the phone, and Cindy and her grandmother spoke briefly before Cindy hung up and returned to work. Cindy thought that Raynella had sounded a little odd, that Raynella seemed too chipper. Raynella rarely visited David's mother and had never brought her flowers before. Ann Troutman was a guidance counselor at Carnes High School, which was Raynella's daughter's school. Katie and her sister were very active in school, and Raynella was at the school quite often as well. Katie used the phone in Troutman's office to call her mom that day around 10:15 a.m. to ask her to bring some stomach medicine. Sergeant Thomas Fox of Knoxville Police lived near Raynella and David. Raynella and Fox's wife were friends. Sometime after Raynella left the hospital and before 11 a.m., Fox was retrieving the newspaper from his mailbox when Raynella pulled up in the car. In all the times that Fox had been in at his mailbox, Raynella had never stopped to talk with him before. As the two talked briefly, Raynella seemed to be in a good mood and laughed during their conversation. Troutman saw Raynella at the high school around 11 a.m. and brought drinks for her and Katie. Raynella stayed at Troutman's office for about 15 minutes and was friendly and pleasant. Kathy Hobson, a secretary at the high school, stated that Raynella arrived between 10:30 and 11 a.m. Raynella went to the guidance office and then came to the main office to speak with Hobson. Raynella stood there quite a while and talked to her and another secretary about several things. Raynella seemed normal and was happy and jovial. Shortly before 11:30 a.m., Raynella placed a call to 911.
County 911.
Help me! Help me!
Ma'am, where are you?
Please help me!
Ma'am, what's going on? Ma'am.
My husband's hurt himself. Hurry!
Okay, where is your husband? Where's your...
Hurry! He's in the van. Please hurry!
Okay, ma'am, calm down. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, I need you to calm down so I can get some help to you, okay? Ma'am.